Maybe I'm amazed that you clicked on this podcast to listen. Or maybe I'm not. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Corey.
And this week we are going to be discussing the debut solo album from Paul McCartney, simply titled McCartney. And it's a solo album in the truest sense of the word because he is essentially a one-man band on this album.
One-man band. I mean, whew, talk about a one-man band experience. This was crazy.
Yes, it is. And this album was released in 1970, and if you're at all familiar with McCartney, you probably know that's the year that the Beatles formally announced their breakup. And much of this album's backstory is shrouded in that event. And we're not going to discuss all of that. If you want to hear us discuss that, please go listen to our episode on the Beatles' Let It Be. We cover all of that stuff surrounding the release and controversies of that time. And I just don't think it would be helpful for us to just be repeating ourselves when we've already done that. But it is a part of this because Paul really just had some stuff on his mind and things to say because his job was ending. Like that, it was really the end of an era for him because it's like, hey, the band's breaking up.
I know I like to think I know a lot about the Beatles, or I enjoy knowing about the Beatles, and diving into the background of McCartney. The breakup was bad, man. It was really, really bad. I never there's just new pieces inside of this one, like where in time this whole record went down as far as release, as far as this just sad breakup, man. It's wild to think of human beings slash musicians slash brothers. I said this, I know I'm not trying to go back to Let It Be, but doing this, to think of one man walking away from his brothers and doing this alone is wild in its own right. It's just, he's sad, McCartney's sad on this album. We're going into it. It's wild. It is wild.
Yeah, it is. And he recorded most of it in a home studio in late 1969, and he continued work on it into early 1970. And yeah, by that point the Beatles weren't really being productive and he was just kind of ready to go, and he had all these songs to write and he had some collaborations with his new wife Linda. And so he was just going with this. And then the big messiness of this all really comes with the release of the album. So it was scheduled initially to be released on April 17th with Apple Records, which was 2 weeks before Let It Be was to be released. And
he didn't know that, right?
Yeah. He has said that he was unaware of that. And there was some contention about that. It's like, we need to push this back. We need Let It Be to come out. But for one reason or another, that didn't end up happening. This album was released ahead of Let It Be.
They sent Ringo with the letter, I read.
This
is something that I never knew, because we always hear about Paul being like, well, I never knew Spencer was there or doing his thing, and I just didn't get the letters, and finally I got them. And I guess on the other side of that, the boys were like, all right, Ringo, you got to go over there and get him to postpone the album, or tell him that we're going to postpone the album.
Yeah. And well, what a terrible position to put Ringo in.
Yeah.
Like, they knew he'd be the one to do it because he was just so neutral. He was the one who was happy to be there. That was Ringo, frankly, in the band. If anybody was just happy to be there, it was him.
He's the ambassador of peace and love too.
Yes, but
Paul was not when he read that letter.
He was living. Ringo.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the way it was delivered was a big part of it. I think there was a sense of betrayal there from his brother.
Yeah.
Ringo. So it was handled very poorly. If I were in Paul's position, I would have been pissed too.
Yeah, it's such a tough position. Because he's not going to read the mail, and then he can say that he had no idea. So you send Ringo to do it, but that's going to break his heart too. I mean, Ringo had said that Paul was, it was either Ringo or Paul who had said like he was yelling crazy shit, like I'll finish you and all types of stuff, just raging inside this breakup.
Yeah,
Mm.
because at that point, so many emotions were coming out at that point.
Yeah.
Um, just it
Well,
wasn't just about this; it was about a lot of things. And then there was the press release sent out with this album where Paul answered the series of questions and said that he was kind of on a break from the Beatles, a la Ross and Rachel, how they were on a break. But the world did not take it that way. The world took it as, oh shit, Paul McCartney just announced that the Beatles broke up. And he said that that wasn't what he meant to announce, which I don't know. I mean, how else are we going to interpret that? And it was the truth.
yeah, but I mean, Lennon had asked for the divorce in '69,
Yeah.
so yeah, it sucks that it came out like that, whether it was on purpose or whether it was just matter of fact in his head and he had said it. Boy, that's such a tough, so many tough spots in
I
this,
mean,
man.
I think it was one of those things he was feeling too honest and wasn't thinking about the repercussions, probably.
Heard.
I mean, the fact was the band was over, and well, McCartney got blamed for it because he was the one that was the messenger of it. And as a result, the fact that this album was released at all, people just automatically, its existence left a bad taste in people's mouths because they knew the Beatles were over. And he announced it in his press for this album. And so automatically, I think that cast a negative, it definitely cast a negative light over the album to an extent where people weren't even fully looking at it from a musical standpoint just because they were reeling from the news of the Beatles breaking up.
They hadn't even heard Let It Be yet.
Yeah.
So they're getting an album knowing that the Beatles are breaking up, not even hearing the album that they know is coming out yet, and are expecting, in my opinion, they're expecting McCartney to blow us away because he's Paul McCartney and he's going to do a solo album. So we're expecting this polished Paul McCartney sound. It's hard to say, McCartney without the Beatles, especially at this point. So I have to agree, there's a huge shadow cast over this album, whether by fault of its own hard-headedness or not, as far as release goes. But it's almost doomed before it's there.
Yeah. And admittedly, because this is such a do it yourself effort, that in and of itself is a huge change from the Beatles. Because right before this, the last McCartney songs we'd heard were on Abbey Road, which
Yeah,
is meticulously produced, beautifully done songs. I mean, we had a whole medley of them.
yeah.
And then we have this. This was pretty surprising to people. And there was initial interest in it. This album did go to number 1 in the US for a few weeks, only to be replaced by Let It Be, of course.
Well, that was a question I wanted to ask you tonight as well, and that is, did it sit at the top of Billboard for 2 weeks because people just needed to hear it regardless? I mean, we haven't even talked about what the people are saying about it after the fact, but like, do you think that's just initial Beatles rush? Everybody's going to buy it regardless numbers, and that's why Let It Be topped it.
I'm sure that was a big part of it. I mean, Beatlemania had definitely died down by 1970. Like,
Yeah,
it was not what it was before. That's been documented. Like, the fan clubs were dwindling in numbers, but let's be very clear, the Beatles were still very capable of selling albums and having hits. That was Abbey Road alone made that very clear. That was doing huge numbers right before this. So there was automatically going to be an interest in this, and we didn't have Let It Be yet. So it was, well, what's this going to be? Oh, I mean, at this point now in the US, it's gone double platinum, which is half of what Let It Be ended up doing. So that shows you still not as big as the Beatles, but well, it wasn't trying to be this album. So
Where'd it end up against stuff like Plastic Ono? Do you know?
Plastic Ono, I'm not sure.
I'm just curious, and I want to touch that a little bit closer to the end of this album, but the all we get these single works from the Beatles members not long after Let It Be, and this is another one or another piece of that shadow that I think is cast over this album because of Paul's readiness to get it out there, not prematurely, but before Let It Be.
Yeah, this did not sell as well as Plastic Ono Band. No, this did sell better than Plastic Ono Band, actually.
Wow. Okay.
Um, but really, now that you mention it, the real winner of the initially of the solo Beatles was George Harrison
Oh yeah.
with All Things Must Pass. So, but he had so much cooking up inside of him that he needed to get out, and he just had those tunes that got people to listen to it. And well, on this one, McCartney had at least one of them that certainly helped its stature through the years, this album. And over time, the reception has been more positive. I don't think it's always it's Band on the Run's pretty universally regarded as the best McCartney post Beatles album. We did an episode on that last year. If you want to listen to that, do that. That would be good to do. But I mean, that was again a much more produced effort with a full band.
Yeah, the track that you're talking about, without saying the name, do you think his reluctance to, or his actual saying no way in hell, am I doing it, to send that out as a single? Do you think that was him not trying to step on the toes of Let It Be, or do you think that he just didn't want to do the normal machine work with McCartney?
Probably a bit of both, but I would think probably more so don't step on the toes of Let It Be, because honestly, realistically, he probably knew he didn't have a shot up against the Let It Be singles because there were already, I mean, well, the title track was going to be being released and there was not going to be any stopping that. I think he was aware of that. And that wasn't hurting him, it was his song.
That's true. That's
I mean,
true.
and then
I
shit, Long and Winding Road, next
heard.
single off Let It Be, also his song. And also, we must remember at this point in time with these rock acts, you didn't have to release your song as a single for it to get radio play.
Heard.
I mean, it certainly happened with Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. Many of the high majority of their well-known songs were never singles. They have hardly any top 40 hits, both of those bands, yet their songs are very well known. And many Beatles songs were never singles and yet are still beloved. I mean, just off of Abbey Road, Here Comes the Sun,
Heard.
never a single,
Heard
and
that.
a beloved song everybody knows. So he could not release a single from the album, and there was one that people picked out, and it became a huge hit. And well, eventually it was a single, but we are not at that part of the story yet.
Heard that.
But we will get there, and if you're familiar, you already know what song we're talking about. But we do have a lot to get through, and I am kind of curious, so especially since we did Let It Be not too long ago, but what kind of drew you to pick this out for this month?
So when I think singer songwriter and I think on their own, that was really one of the first ones that came into my brain. It's the epitome of it. Uh, I could sit here and tell you I picked it for this reason, I picked it for that reason, but all those are in hindsight and beautiful universe pairings that we get when we break down these albums. It's funny how this album fits on a couple different levels with stuff we've listened to lately. But for me, really, on this one, he's up there as one of my favorite musicians of all time. I mean, he's both of our favorite Beatles. And I'd have to say, Yeah, he just automatically pops in there.
Yeah, and interestingly, it also should be noted, I think a big part of this album's legacy is the fact that McCartney took this one man band approach two more times with sequels to this album, McCartney 2 in 1980 and McCartney 3 in 2020. And all very interestingly done at major times of transition. This was in the Beatles breakup, the next one was after Wings was over. And I mean, 2020, obviously, a pandemic. So, all major times of transition for Paul McCartney in the case of the last one for everybody. But I just think that's a really interesting trend that we saw with that. And but it all started here. I think that's really cool.
He put so much love, so much of his heart into music that it really, I mean, it takes him to this level. For that level of seclusion and this level of like heartbreak that even his family tells you that he was full of during this. He really does. That's why he is one of the best of all time. But there is 120 million% of himself inside of all those groups. He has to take these pieces for himself. In hindsight, again, on the three, at that point, it's like, yeah, that's what Paul does in this transition time. But trying to put myself in the headspace of a listener, especially a huge Beatle fan back then, in this day and like in this time when the release is, it's just wild, to think what people were hearing as this whole thing unfolded.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to say because we weren't there and we've seen so much since then that it's hard to think of this as it was considered cutting edge. It was cutting edge in some ways for its time, but it's hard to kind of see that now. But we weren't there.
Yeah. Like, did it stick the landing as a lo-fi album? Because now it's heralded as one of the first and things like that. I couldn't find anything that I could latch onto and say, okay, this was the popular vote back then on that aspect. But there are questions that I have. Did he really record this as a lo-fi album? I think that's my ultimate question. And I think a great question to just go in on is, did he record this as a lo-fi masterpiece, or is this a stream of consciousness of a man who, by the last love song of this album, is telling us that he's in a place that he has no idea what's going on and he needs help? I think that's the big question I try to answer on this album.
I think maybe it's a bit of both and maybe something else possibly too.
There,
But with that being said, I'm ready to dive into this bad boy.
let's get it.
My yoga studio is a temple to flexibility, and so is my business. Thanks to my Amex Business Gold Card, it automatically flexes with my monthly spending, so I can get extra points on purchases like my Metro card and my new stereo system. Check it out. Let's stretch those bods.
Earn 4 times points on your top 2 eligible spending categories each month with an Amex Business Gold Card. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Built for business by American Express.
All right, so the album opens with The Lovely Linda, which is less than a minute long, so really just more of an intro than a song, and it's obviously an ode to his wife, with the flowers in her hair. I mean, I think this is a very nice intro. I just wish it was a full song, honestly. I think that we get a really nice piece here. And I mean, I like that it's a fragment. I think that's real as to what he was thinking, but I don't know. I just think there's something here that could have been a full, well thought out song. I like it for what it is, but I just wish it was more because I like what I hear so much.
I have to take a deep breath there because, I mean, that's a very close summation of a lot of this album from me first listen. I'm going to hit hard. I'm going to hit Paul hard on this one. But I might sound like I'm coming across harsh, but I'm really playing devil's advocate in the sake of, like, I'm a lover of the love, and I feel that he's in love. This is a snippet. It's a 45-second snippet. I can see it as an intro, but just like you said, it's clearly a song, like there's a song there, Paul. So it's hard for me not to hear it as just, I use the word stream of consciousness, but these like little pieces, like these art pieces. I hold on to that word because I'm going to use it a bunch going through here, but I don't qualify this one as an art piece. There are art pieces on this album. This one for me, intro, okay, I'll give it that. But I worry for the sound here, a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this an art piece either. We are not there yet on this album, but I do think now's a good point to talk about the first actual song on the album, not just an intro, which is That Would Be Something, which is interestingly one of two songs that George Harrison said he liked on the album. He said most of it wasn't for him, but there were two that he did like, and one was the big hit, and the other was this one. And I think that it's a breezy, kind of folk influenced tune. I don't know, it's a bit really redundant lyrically for me. I just wish there was a bit more here. I think it's perfectly nice sounding, but again, I mean, it's hard not to feel. I can definitely, if I heard this in 1970, I would have been really underwhelmed knowing like this was a in the light of the Beatles. It it's hard not to feel like this is missing something. I don't think it's I don't know. I think it's a good showcase for him as a one-man band, I'll give it that, but I'm not quite it doesn't stick out to the extent that some other ones do here.
It doesn't. It's a almost full thought, it's like it's just short of a complete thought for me. The bass line is great, but I mean, look at who he is. There's a lot of this that I could argue was just built from a bass line. And I'm not saying that great songs aren't written from bass lines. That's not what I'm saying. But here, Paul is alone, recording on a 4-track for a lot of these by himself, playing everything on it. And this one, for me, is, and I'm glad it's at the start of the album, and I'm glad it's the first full song we hear, because I have in my notes that it feels like the first time you get a 4-track going. And if you've ever used a 4-track recorder, you know what I'm talking about. But like the first time you really figure out what you can do. And this redundant song, this repetitive song keeps stacking here. Very reminiscent of what you actually do with this 4-track. Even with the 4 stanzas that are written here, it just doesn't hit as a full piece for me. I love really when an artist is out there whimsically and doing these scat pieces and stuff like that. But the scat pieces in this, for me, focus on that solo-ness, and it puts it in that spotlight, and I'm not sure whether that's for good or for bad on this. It just is. It's not full. It's almost empty. I hate to say it. I hot tea take. That way I don't feel as bad saying it. Hot tea take. This song is missing the Beatles. And it's hard not to hear that. And it's hard not to feel that, in my opinion. This song is missing the Beatles.
I think that might even be nice. I'm not even sure this is Beatles. I don't think this is even Beatles ready, like the song itself. You know what I mean? Like, not just in terms of considering everything else they have, even
Agreed.
from songs on this album, if they were going to be choosing ones to do, they wouldn't have picked this one.
No, I'm not saying it would have made it as a Beatles song. What I'm saying is that what it's missing is his brotherhood, is okay. Other musicians, where I think this could soar. If this was a fully thought out and written and produced piece, it'd roll on a B-side, maybe, something like that. But I'm saying it's missing a band. It's missing people. It's missing his brothers.
That I would agree with. And, maybe that was part of it, why he doing this kind of stuff. Maybe he knew, I need to do a band again, even if it's after a post-Beatles one.
I feel like we maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but just so if you're listening along, you can hear it. I think we hear a lot of early Wings in here. I think we hear a lot of early Wings sounds in here.
I can
I don't know
see
if
that,
this one
yeah.
is there, but yeah, it comes along. Um, yeah, it's track two. It doesn't stop you from listening to this at all.
No,
It isn't there all the way. I know I
could have
keep
been
repeating.
better. That's
It could have.
very frustrating. But with that being said, we just gotta keep on keeping on, and that's what we're gonna do with our next one. Valentine Day. That's correct, not Valentine's Day, just Valentine Day. Um, and this is our first instrumental track that we have on the album. There are hardly any vocals on this, and yeah, we're gonna have a few of these songs here. I'm warning you all now, and this is the least remarkable of them, in my opinion. I think that it's just not that dynamic musically. I mean, does it make me want to turn the album off? No. But does it add to the album? Also no. Like, so it's just kind of there for me. And I don't think there's anything like experimental enough um in its sound for me to want to listen to it again, like to go back to it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I said the art piece. This is the first of the art pieces for me. I feel like it's the weakest. And in a retrospective aspect, if I didn't know that there were other ones like it on this album that, in my opinion, are there on purpose to make this album different, I wouldn't understand why it's here. And even from my early notes, I have unfinished with a question mark. Do I still think after listening to it over and over and over again, if it's unfinished, maybe I'm giving the benefit of the doubt here, but I will say no, I don't feel like it's unfinished. I just feel like this is one of these art pieces that he's putting in here. And again, retrospectively, I know that it's part of the pacing of this album, the intentional pacing of this album, but at first listen, it's tough to understand why this is here.
Yeah, most definitely. Just again, another one of those songs where there's something missing, and it's not even with the last one where you think this needs a band. I don't think we really need this on an album. I think this could be a B-side. Give Paul some extra royalty money, but
Well, and that's the other thing that I feel like I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, but then I'm just so torn because if I know, or I think I know who Paul McCartney is, and I know that he's giving us himself or trying to give us himself, then I can understand where these pieces. I go back to that stream of consciousness, but I can understand where these pieces come from. They're just not my favorite works that I've heard so far from him.
no, not at all. And I know we've been kind of harsh here so far.
It's so hard.
This
It's so
album's off to a slow start. It is. It is.
and we're talking about our man here, and it's so hard,
It
but
hurts. This
it
must
does.
be how you felt during Love Angel Music, baby.
And that one was a little bit easier because I knew that it was your first foray, but now we're sitting here talking about a beloved artist of both of ours, and it's tough picking them apart. But we are, for you guys, we are.
We gotta keep it real here and spill that tea. But fortunately, I think we start to get into a better space in the album at the midway point of side one, which is track number 4, Every Night. Um, this one was developed during the Get Back sessions, which became Let It Be. And he wrote it on holiday in Greece. And I think as a result of that, this does sound, I'll say it, this sounds more Beatle ready than any of the other songs on the first side of the album. And well, that works in its favor. This is, I think, the best song on the first side of the album. And lyrically, it's a good reflection into where he is at the time, which I always appreciate. Because he's starting one chapter with his new wife, Linda. They're going to start a family, and he's moving into this role of domesticity, but he's leaving his band behind. He's ending another chapter. And so two life-altering events are happening for Paul McCartney at this point in time. And I think this song does a pretty neat way of summing it up in a nice short package that's not too heavy.
No, it's not too heavy, and it packs a punch. We're coming in here at 2:33, and it's a really good 2:33 in my opinion. I love the way this song walks. I love the way this song feels. Immediately when you hear this song, first listen on this album, or just any listen on this album, there's just promise in the air. Musically, it just feels good. This is the Paul McCartney that I love, because here it's so relaxed that it feels like he's making this beautiful music without even trying. And I love that about him. And I love that about this composition here. This is a neat one. This is, I mean, if you dive down deep into it, this is a man, like you said, who is in between, I won't even say music, but like just period, two loves. But more so for this man, it's his old band and moving into this new life. And if you really want to get down to it, he alludes to just wanting to spend a little bit more time alone with the band before he gets down with the rest of life. He is definitely in a melancholy space in his head right now in this breakup.
Yeah. So yeah, a very real song. I'm glad we both like this one, because
oh yeah,
just means that, because this is why we love Paul. It's stuff like this, and we've got even more to go, fortunately. So with that being said, it's time for a short medley of sort. Hot as Sun and Glasses. Hot as Sun is a real strict instrumental piece. It has a very nice summery feel to it, which I enjoy listening to. Definitely sticks out a bit more than the first instrumental. I'm like, I like this groove. I can listen to this. This is fun. And Glasses is a bit more dark, which okay, kind of I think is showing where he was, but here's the most fascinating part of this. So at the end we hear a little outro, and it was a piece of a song actually titled Suicide, and Paul McCartney didn't write it for himself or the Beatles. He wrote it for another artist, old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra. And honestly, it's not quite as him writing a song for Sinatra. I don't think that's as far-fetched as it might seem at first. If that, like, because I'm just saying, I could hear Sinatra covering a McCartney ballad.
oh yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Like, I could totally hear him doing a like Live and Let Die, or Let It Be, or the song we'll talk about later here. I could totally hear him doing that, but I think that's really neat that he did that, and that just makes me appreciate the song more. It's like we get this little glimpse into something that we might not have thought of at first, but makes perfect sense, and we hear this kind of what could have been, and Paul adopts the sound of it a bit, and I think that's a really neat fragment that we get.
That's wild. So Suicide was written for Frank Sinatra to sing?
Yes.
No shit. I never knew that. And we won't see Suicide here, but if you want to hear what we're talking about, on the re-release of McCartney, it's the first track on the on like the bonus stuff, like the cutting room floor stuff.
Yeah.
That's wild. I never knew that. That's
I learned
crazy.
that this week. Yeah, which was pretty wild too.
So this hottest sun into glasses, this hottest sun glasses that we get here is our second art piece on this album for me. We get a cool groove, we get a really cool funky groove. These are on purpose art pieces here. I just can't get around them any other way, especially glasses. I mean, it's literally wine glasses with his fingers running around the top of them. That kind of sound. But it doesn't fall. I don't question it as much as I did Valentine's Day. And I ask myself, is that because I'm already in this headspace? But it moves, Hottest Sun moves well, where I don't feel like we got that same. Valentine Day ended up being like just this wild guitar romp, almost like a jam. And this one sounds chiseled out, at least for the most part. This is a neat little art piece here going into the next song.
Yeah, most definitely. And yeah, with that being said, I'm ready to get into the next song actually, which is Junk, which basically I think this is a song about a thrift shop is kind of or stuff you would see in one. Definitely unique for the time. I'm thinking a lot of people weren't hearing this circa 1970. It's a pretty sparse and over quickly song. It's less than 2 minutes. This one seems to be regarded as a highlight of this album. I'm gonna have to disagree with that and say I find this overrated in the context of songs on this album. Just I don't know, something about it. I think it's a neat idea, but again, it just doesn't add up all the way for me. And it sounds like a demo, not a full song. I don't know. I don't get it.
Heard that. I That's wild. Well, here's our first other side of the coin. I really enjoy this song. I love the guitar here. I love the waltz of this 1 2 3 1 2 3. I always enjoyed that from earlier writings, whether it be him and Lennon or just him. But like for me, his genius for molding melodies is on display for everyone to see here. This song really does it well. And where I gave him crap earlier for the scatting, the acapella here, it adds, and I enjoy it. Even though I think I really would love it as a separate guitar part. That's just me nitpicking. And then we get that beautiful xylophone. Again, this is all him playing this. I really think this is a beautiful piece. I really enjoy this song.
Alrighty then. Maybe I'll go back and listen to it more and like it more. Who knows? It could be a grower, not a shower for me. But on the real other side of the coin from this one, we have our next song, which is Man We Was Lonely. Um which I call this a campy Paul McCartney song. Like it's got that kind of old timey, I don't know, pre-rock arrangement to it. And I don't know, for some reason, the one song that might put it right, I don't know why it is. It doesn't sound like it, but in terms of like the campy kind of silly Paul song, like Oobla Dee Oobla Da, kind of that kind of thing. And I don't like this song as much as that, but this seems to be one of the more derided songs on the album, and just like Oobla Dee Oobla Da is, frankly. But guess what? I actually really enjoy this song. I think he does this kind of song well. I like to hear Paul have some fun. I mean, is it as dynamic as again some of the as some of the Beatles tracks in this vein? No, but I think it works for what it is. I don't think that I wouldn't give it too much crap. Do I think it's an all-time McCartney classic? Not quite, but I enjoy listening to it. I don't think it's a skip.
No, I don't either. I like the way this song goes, whether it be on purpose or not. This song, when it begins, reminds me of an old school, fun, out there Lennon duet with him. Like some fun stuff the Beatles used to do. And it ends, ironically enough, as a Linda aided piece, when it's fully realized and she's bringing in these backing vocals here. I dig this song. This is a fun, cool song. This is another song where it's right there, almost like you said. It's a cool one, not one of his best ever, but I think it could have been in a differently produced mind space.
So if it was on the White Album, is that what you're?
Not even more so. Like I questioned and went back through, but I wondered if any of these really were ever re-recorded as Wings songs, because they just seemed like we had stated earlier before, or I had stated earlier before, that it's just missing a band. Some of these are like, man, I wonder if he ever worked these later on into fully fleshed out. It feels weird saying that because I know he fully fleshed out these songs, and I'm not trying to take that away. They're just a very different McCartney than we're used to.
Oh, most definitely. And I think that's shadow that hangs over the album for better or for worse. It's
Yeah,
different than we're used to from Paul, before or since,
heard.
frankly. Because since then, he's gone into the more ornate stuff. Just right after this, we get Wings, not too long after this. So, but with that, that's the end of the first side of the album. It's time to flip it over with our next one, track 8, which is bit more of a rock tune. Ooh You. Um, this one has a self reference to the song Blackbird, which I love to hear that, of course, because classic tune right there. Um, yeah, this is really one especially just this would have been I think it's a cool song, but this one definitely needed a full band. I just wish this was a Beatles song. If it got the full Beatles treatment, I would enjoy it a lot more than I do here. And that's just that's all I can think of in this one. Even more than the other songs here so far. This is just and I haven't even seen proof of it. Like it wasn't included on a track list. I haven't really seen documentation of it being recorded during the Let It Be sessions or White Album or whatever, but I just this one needed the Beatles more than anything else. For me, this was the one that I just can't imagine being a really good Beatles song.
Yeah, straight out of my notes. Can't help to listen because it's a beautiful song, but this is possibly a hit if produced.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I mean, this is a great jam. This is exactly what I was talking about just before when I looked to see, like, was this ever redone, or was this ever done with Wings? Or of course it was probably done on stage or something like that, but I mean ever recorded. And it wasn't. This is another one that, if I'm not mistaken, he said that this was pretty much all ad-libbed. This and the one that follows this, actually. And I can see that a bit, but that I mean, if you've ever seen the Peter Jackson documentary, and you've seen the way he puts Let It Be together, I wholeheartedly believe that, that he could just boop, 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 boop. All right, here we go. Ooh You's
Yeah.
done. And I think I feel that here. I just wish it was all the way, because this is a really cool song.
Yep. Yeah. So
It
uh,
it's almost like we found like this lost recording, and it just isn't finished. It's very tough. It's very tough.
it's demos. They sound like demos.
They
It's
do.
not all fully thought out. And that's why I think I hate to say it, I think lo-fi is a nicer way to describe this later on.
Agreed.
Because some of these, frankly, they sound like Beatles demos that
Agreed.
didn't become full songs, and some of them you really hear could have been full Beatles songs, but some of them almost were, in fact. But it's just they weren't, and that's why I think calling it lo-fi, I think that's just a more positive retrospective appraisal. Because let's be real, in a lot of the cases of debut solo albums, no matter how well done they are, they're leftovers from the band that they were in.
Heard.
I mean that's all things must pass. Almost all of those songs I think date back to the Beatles because he had so many songs he was sitting on. Same with Stevie Nicks' Belladonna's the first I think of, but a lot of
Heard.
songs that dated back several years because she was sitting on them.
Most definitely.
Like so that's really let's just be realistic here. A lot of these are Beatles outtakes or
Yeah.
at least considered for it because it's the first McCartney solo album.
Yeah.
So that's just, how it is. But hey, at the same time, who doesn't want to hear Beatles outtakes? Who's gonna complain about that? So
Heard.
um but in the meantime, we have kind of two unreleased songs in one here with the next one, Mama Miss America. This is an instrumental that's almost 4 minutes long, and it's actually two separate pieces combined into one. I would say for me, this song is I say I love it as a individual song? No, but I think it's a really cool look into his process because it is through these kind of jams and instrumental pieces that songs get created. And well, why wouldn't I want to hear the creative process of one of the greatest songwriters ever? I feel like we're kind of getting that look into it, and on that level, I appreciate this piece. But again, this is an art piece more than it is a song.
Granddad, what's good?
Hey there, got us a quarter pounder with cheese and McNuggets.
Wow, haven't had our special McDonald's order in a minute.
Heard your little tic-tac-toe dance didn't get no likes.
Oh man, is Mom telling everybody?
You know she is.
There's a deal for every favorite grandson at McDonald's. Right now, get one favorite like a quarter pounder with cheese or 10-piece chicken McNuggets and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
ABC Mondays. The Bachelor is back, and everyone is falling for America's heartthrob, Joey Graziadei.
Chef's kiss, 10 out of 10.
He's taking another shot at love.
I am definitely ready to find my wife.
But will he find his perfect match?
I am freaking out. I'm about to lose it.
There's something I need to know.
I'm done here.
I thought it would be easier.
The Bachelor. New Mondays, 8, 7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Total art piece. Personal jam session is one of my early notes on this. I say that more so because the bass line in the first half of this piece, we'll say like the first, just the first half, the first song that's actually in this 2-song medley, so to speak. The bass line is so rudimentary that it just, for me, feels like it's one of those bass lines that you just hit and record and then jam over top of. And I think that's what we get here. And it's neat. And I'm happy you said that because it's a great way to look at it. I put that as a negative note almost. Like, it's just a personal jam session. But you're right. That Silver Lining Playbook, is awesome here that we're getting to hear raw McCartney jams, in a 4-minute piece. By 2:29 here, we're in a totally different song. And I won't say either is better than the other, only because, again, in my opinion, these are jams. I'm 99% positive that I read that he said Mama Miss America was just ad-libbed. So it's just that jam run on it, but it's cool. It's just cool to see that. Without that though, it's tough. Yeah,
but the next song is not a jam because this actually almost was, and in fact now it is a Beatles song, Teddy Boy. This was on the initial track list for the 1969 Get Back album that eventually was repurposed into Let It Be. But this was a track for that album, and it was released. We got the original 1969 Glyn Johns mix of that album with the Let It Be Super Deluxe from a couple of years ago. So now a Beatles version of this song does exist. But we're not going to talk. I am going to talk about this version. I'm glad this song was resurrected. I'm glad he didn't just let this go to the cutting room floor. This is a story song about a son who feels abandoned when his widowed mother takes up with another man, which I think an interesting choice, I would say. I mean, McCartney lost his mother at a young age. But I like this. I like that. I love when we go into these different perspectives. That's part of why I love Taylor Swift's Folklore so much. If you haven't listened to that episode of ours, listen to that. But yeah, I enjoy this one, and it's pretty short, like less than 2.5 minutes long, but it gets its point across effectively. and I want to hear what you say before I add my final thought on this song.
Well, I'm other side of the coin on this one.
Oh,
This is Paul McCartney's. Well, I won't even say that. This is Story Song. It's so great. That was the first two words that I have written down here. But for me, I love McCartney's story songs, man. And this one just it just falls flat. This one is it musically it's boring to me. These are such hard things to say. But that being said, I hope that the pettiness that is in my heart somewhere that is giving me this idea or saying this is totally wrong. But knowing that this was a Paul song that John shit all over during recording and did do-si-do call outs and square dance call outs and made it unrecordable until we go through and do all the stuff later on. Knowing that happened and knowing that he put that on this album, I just hope that it's not a jab at John, because if it is, in my opinion, it backfired. You know, it's like it's not your strongest song. Again, my opinion, it's not Paul's strongest story song. And I feel like after Mama Miss America, minus one other song on here, maybe two, that we're running out of super awesome ideas at this point. And this one, I worry, is a little bit of a jab at John.
I mean, it probably is. This is their era of sniping at each other. We get more direct diss tracks and albums from both of them following this one. So it very well may be. And I mean, here's my final thought. This might be why I like the song. This might be you might have to question my journalistic integrity here, but being that this is a story song and my favorite lady Cher did a lot of those in the early 70s. I really wish during that era she covered this song.
I could see her
I
doing
think
this.
this fits along well with the the half breeds and dark ladies of the world.
Heard
And
that.
that's kind of why I wish she did it. But that's my final thought on the song.
I could see her doing that.
Yeah, I think it would have been cool as hell.
Oh yeah.
But she couldn't have covered our next song probably, which is Sing Along Junk. Kind of a misleading title because this is an instrumental track. It's a more thought out instrumental version of Junk from earlier in the album. I probably would have maybe liked the song a bit more if he used this backing track instead, but overall, I think it kind of speaks to my issue. I don't really think of Paul McCartney as being like a folk singer, and that's kind of what I got, I think, with the first Junk, and I don't think that's his strong suit. I think this is cool. I think it's a cool other look at another song here, but I'm not sure the album needed it.
This is where I say it. There's not much going on right here on this side. I mean, this for me is the backing track, or maybe like one of the instrumental backing tracks that he used to record the vocals on Junk, if that's the case. But still, even if that's not the case, you're giving us an instrumental Junk. You're giving us an instrumental on the album of a song on the other side. I don't understand why.
And especially on your first solo album. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt there, but
No,
that's
you're
just
good.
it's a bizarre choice. I agree.
So if I go Silver Lining Playbook, the only way I can say, okay, this makes sense on the album is if it is an art piece and it is keeping the pace of this album with the art pieces. That's the only way that it works on this album for me. And I'm literally going out of my way to give the benefit of the doubt on that one, because I just don't understand it.
I don't think it really helps with the pacing of the album much at all. It's really just an interlude, and at this point, you're just kind of losing interest in it all.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's cool we do the art pieces, but like, there's a lot of them here for a solo debut, especially, and knowing who it is at this point, it's a bit frustrating, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, so you don't have a 13-track album, you have a 12-track album. Like, I just don't understand why it was so important to do the instrumental for a song you've already shown on this album.
Yeah.
I can't.
Or
I've
why you
tried.
couldn't have just done an actual different song, which I'm sure you had.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
Just saying. But when it all gets frustrating, I guess I could say, when might get frustrated with this album, McCartney brings it back with a moment that reminds the world why he's such a beloved songwriter. And that is our penultimate track, the big one, Maybe I'm Amazed. um, the ultimate love song of the album, obviously dedicated to his wife Linda. This is one of the only songs here that was not recorded at his home studio. This was done at Abbey Road. He did play all the instruments on it, but it definitely does sound a bit more polished than the rest of the album. And I think you can tell he probably spent more time on this song than he did on a lot of the shorter songs here. But well, I think it was well worth it. Because even the people who were hating on this album back then, they were so disappointed by it, they had to concede, okay, there's one gem, and it's Maybe I'm Amazed. And as we alluded to earlier, it was not a single initially, but it didn't stop the song from getting notice and radio play. And I think that says something. Like, it was decided this is the one. At this point, it's a modern day standard. I just don't. It's a beautiful song. I don't know how much more can be said about it that hasn't been said. It's Maybe I'm Amazed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's love with an exclamation point. This is one of my favorite love songs of all time. This is one of the, in my opinion, best written love songs of all time. And I think it stems from it's love in so many different levels, but ultimately it's the love for this one woman that he shares. It's the Beatles are breaking up. Him and Lennon broke up. I mean, he's depressed. He's secluded, and these lyrics are an insane love note, to his one true love. Shit, that's the reason Hey Jude screams through this, and it works. It's because it's so from the heart, so powerful. I'll say it's a masterpiece of a one-man band. And I'll tell you right now, I didn't realize it was on this album when I picked it. And I'll tell you right now, if I didn't know, I would never have said it was on. I always thought this was on a Wings album. And there's no way I would have lost the trivia if you asked me if he did this all by himself. It's an amazing composition and an awesome love song. And hot tea take, if you bought the album back then just for this song, you got your money's worth.
Yeah, I would agree.
This song is that song.
I would agree with that, but I think many people think this is a Wings song because in 1977, a live version of this song with Wings was released as a single and did become a top 10 hit in the US. And then it did, and that is a slower version than this one, but I think it's the one people are most familiar with, probably, if they didn't buy this album. And I mean, that's a beautiful version as well. It works in that setting too, because it does sound like a full band song even here. And that's why it adapted itself to it. And I went to see McCartney last year at when he came to Baltimore, and for some reason he did this at the show. I had to find video to prove it though, because I didn't remember him doing it. And I remember almost every other song from the show. And I'm like, how do I not remember? And then I watched the video and okay, I will say this, hot tea take, Paul, if you do go back on tour, I'm not going to be mad if you retire. Maybe I'm Amazed, because just vocally, obviously his voice is not what it used to be.
Oh, heard.
He gets the screams, but it's just not the same. I wish he'd save his energy for something else. It's not like Hey Jude. He doesn't
Heard.
need to do the screams because everybody can do the na 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 nas in the stadium.
Heard.
Because there were a lot of moments. Let's be real. There were a lot of moments during the show. I could tell he was relying on the backup vocalist to do some notes for him. All respect for him. It was an amazing night. These are nitpicks. I still got to see the legend Paul McCartney do so many of his very best songs, but this obviously wasn't a highlight for me of the show.
I would have cried the whole entire time this song was on. That's it. That's how I would have remembered that he played this song.
Well, maybe it's because he did Let It Be later. That's the one that or maybe it was the assholes behind me at the concert because they were truly obnoxious and talking throughout the show and making fun of oobla dee oobla da with their fake obnoxious lyrics. So they were terrible people. I hope they had a bad day today.
Get them.
I mean, yeah, I don't know who you think you are talking like that at a Paul McCartney concert. I'm sure you paid good money for. You're just an idiot wasting your own time. Yeah, these people should be very happy I don't know their names, clearly, because I'm dragging them, but it did not detract from the experience of seeing Sir Paul too much because it's still Sir Paul.
Hell yeah.
But at this point, how do we end an album after Maybe I'm Amazed?
There's only one way, and it's this way.
Yes, it is. It's a Crina Core, an experimental percussion track. I think this is a great way to close the album. I think it's nice to have a calm down after the showstopper. And this is our last art piece, and I'm gonna say it now, it's the best of them by a mile, in my opinion. And so the Crina Core are a Brazilian Amazon tribe that Paul wrote about after seeing a documentary on them and their way of life. And Linda helps with the vocals on this one, which is really just breathing and animal sounds. But you know what? It's a really cool, neat listen. It's I love this vibe to it. Like I do hear a story in this song. And that's impressive to do with just the music, no words, but we get a whole story with Crina Core, and I'm just very happy. I just kind of wish the other art pieces were this strong, honestly. This is a banger in its own sedate way.
Yeah, this is the ultimate art piece on this album. And I'm right with you. It sounds, straight off the cut, the best out of all of them. I think that stems from this whole entire process on this one. I mean, this was a wild one. Reading about them recording this at at Morgan, it was insane. I mean, they built a fire, and of course they didn't light it, but they used the twig cracking sounds. And Paul went out and got a bow and arrow, and the bow and arrow sound is done live. And like you said, him and Linda are doing animal sounds, and the stampede is the guitar cases. And I mean, we literally get this wild indigenous tribe, this indigenous Brazilian tribe. We get this mini Peter and the Wolf kind of musical experience here, and it's really cool. It's really cool. I said it tongue in cheek, there's only one way to end this album, and it was clear, it was in jest, but in all honesty, because of the way this album was structured with the art pieces, it does make sense. Whether it's a Silver Lining Playbook makes sense or not, it makes sense for this art piece to be here on the way out.
Yeah, and well, with that being said, there we have it. McCartney. Solo debut. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who would have
what
thunk
a
it?
journey. Well, you picked this album. Now I want to know what your grade for it is.
I did. I picked this wild one, and I picked it not even knowing it. I mean, knowing of it, but not knowing it like I should have, or maybe I shouldn't have. This is a tough one for Sir Paul, in the fact of where he was as a human being, where he was as an artist, and really, in my opinion, this hot-headedness and a need to get this music out to everyone. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it ends up sounding a little unfinished, and that's being nice on some places in this album. I do connect with it in the fact that it is his work, his unbridled work, and I have to accept it on that level. But as a first solo outing for this artist, taking away what I know of him and going solely off this album as merit, this album falls short, and it has a lot more lows on it for me than it does highs. It is wild for me to say this, but I'm going to give this album a C plus.
I'm right there with you. I have the same grade. Hate to do it to you, Paul. You know I love you, but oh, again, it sounds like Beatles demos, a lot of it, and some of these songs definitely would have been better in a different setting. And again, I think there's just too many art pieces. I don't think that we needed that from especially a solo debut. This was not the way to, and I respect this album more than I actually like it, and that I that's my big thing here with this.
Oh my God, I couldn't have said it any better. I've been looking for those words all week. I respect this album more than I like it. It's perfect.
Yeah. It wasn't one I went into knowing too well at all, and I think there's a reason I stayed away from it. And I'm glad I know it, but is it one I'm going to be going back to a ton? Probably not. So yeah, sorry, Paul, but can't win them all.
Yeah.
Hey, I gave you 2 glowing episodes before though, so we did that for you before. So
Heard that.
and we'll probably have more in the future, but we're not there yet. But in the meantime, what is your favorite track?
I'm gonna take, and I'm not mad at you if you did, but I'm gonna take Maybe I'm Amazed away and give you my favorite in hopes of giving some listening to everybody that's with us today. And I'm gonna have to say Junk is my favorite song outside of Maybe I'm Amazed.
Yeah, I don't I kind of agree with you. It's not even maybe I'm amazed is kind of grandfathered in as its own entity at this point. It definitely does exist outside of this album, but I'm on the way other side of the coin for you. My favorite non maybe I'm amazed track is Teddy Boy.
Okay, there you go.
There we have it, McCartney. But well, before we get to our big announcement coming up, I want to tell you all to follow us on social media at Turntables and Tea Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and at Turntables Tea on Twitter. I have the links for those in the bio for our notes if you haven't seen that already. Also be sure to subscribe and rate us wherever you're listening to us. Leave us a nice review. Always appreciated, because we hope you enjoy listening to our show as much as we enjoy producing.
Yes, indeed. So
Yes.
what is our big announcement?
Yeah, so we are this coming month, we're going to do something a bit we've never done before, which is do a kind of album battles in a way. We both will be doing this, picking 2 somewhat similar artists, people who get compared or not. You could consider them rivals, you could not. Either or, and it's not meant to pit anybody against each other. It's just kind of to have some fun competition, because little bit of that never hurt anybody, and could lead to a possible, if you all like this, could lead to some more stuff like that, more of a tournament stuff down the road. I think we might be interested in doing. But we're gonna do that and we each picked one, and I'm going first with that, and I decided to pick 2 um divas who've been compared a lot to each other, rightly or wrongly. Um, both, frankly, rightly and wrongly, and they're both legends. I am not pitting women against each other before anyone comes to me. This is just for fun. But I decided to go with Madonna and Janet Jackson, 2 of my all-time favorites who I enjoyed discussing here before. And it's been a while since we've gone back to their wells, so I think this is a great time to do it. And as for the albums I compared, so we will be doing somewhat similar albums by them, not in sound, but both deeply personal albums released within months of each other. And we're going to do Madonna first, and the album we will be doing is it's one I walked into at the end of our Miseducation of Lauryn Hill episode. It is 1998's Ray of Light. I did make the bold claim that I think it is a better album than the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and you question my journalistic integrity.
Now you got to put your money where your mouth is.
Oh, and I'm prepared to. I have no problem. I am ready to do it after I walked into it. Like, I'm going to prove it.
I like it.
And do you know this album?
Very sparsely.
Okay. Yeah, you probably at least know the couple big hits off of it, possibly.
Yeah. Most Madonna hits I know.
Yeah. And there were a couple of huge ones, as with almost all of Madonna's albums, but nope, I'm ready to make my case here and to talk about a truly wild and fascinating album, Ray of Light.
Yeah.
One that still just inspires deep fascination all these years later, and it's one album I consider part of my bloodstream, one that I've always been thinking back in my head. One day we'll discuss Ray of Light, and the time has come, and I'm very excited to do so.
Yeah, man. This is 1 year before you were born, right?
1 year after.
After, okay.
I should have taken that, but this is a year.
There you go.
This was a year after I was born, but yeah. Either way, I'm very excited to. I can't overstate how excited. One of my all-time favorite albums. So
let's get at it.
Yeah, just stay tuned for it. Well, you're frozen when your heart's not open and when you're not listening to the podcast. So stay tuned for next week.
Peace.